I'm Rose Palmer, and I'm the Director of Public Affairs for the Redlands Stake of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In 1851, this Mexican ranchero here in the San Bernardino Valley was transformed when over 400 members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints were the first wagon train coming through the Cajon Pass, came into the valley and transformed the whole area. Brigham Young, who was the president and prophet of the church at the time, had sent these pioneers to colonize this valley. They needed a way station so that, when people joined the church in other areas in the South Pacific and even in Europe, they wanted a way station so people could come around to San Pedro Harbor, enter there, and then come here to the San Bernardino colony, as they called it. When these colonists came, they came ready to establish their homes here in this area. Now, they were experienced colonizers. They had come from the East Coast. They started in Ohio, they had gone to Missouri, they had been in Illinois, and then into the Rocky Mountains. And so they had gone in and established whole entire communities. So when they arrived here, they were ready to get to work. When they came to the valley, you looked over, it was just beautiful. It was in the fall, and so there were all these tall grasses, and the grazing cattle were all here. They went and were able to negotiate with the Lugo family to be able to purchase the San Bernardino Rancho. Now the rancho, what they thought was 100,000 acres, was really 33,500 acres here in this area, and they purchased it for $77,000. And at gold rush interest rates, which was at 3% a month, which turns out to be 30% a year. So the interest rate on that first year was somewhere around $23,000 or $24,000, in addition to the principal that they had to pay back. So it was a huge amount of burden that they had taken on. Now the church didn't buy the property. The apostles actually had the land in their names, and collectively, the group of Mormons that were here paid for the rancho. So they came ready to build a community, but also they had this huge burden to pay for the rancho. They came into the valley, and they purchased the land from what is Rancho exit on the 10 freeway, which is by Fontana, and all the way out to Ukaipa. This whole area, 33,000 acres, was huge. They started, as soon as they were able to get into the property, which was in September, they started just this building boom. So within 2 months, 100 homes were built. Okay, so just about the time that they were able to get their homes built, they got word that there was an Indian uprising that was starting here all the way to Santa Barbara. And the Indians were gathering in the mountains. And so the Mormons were very concerned about their safety. So they got their adobe homes, tied them up with ropes, and actually pulled them with oxen all into what they called the stockade. It was about 700 feet long, and the back sides of their homes was one wall, and then they were able to build. They put these tall posts all the way around the rest of the stockade. So this 8-acre, I think it was 7 or 8 acre area, became their collective home, and they ended up staying in that location for the next 2 years. What they did is just about the time of the uprising, the chief of the Kahia Indians came down into the area, and he was able to assure everyone that he would take care of it. He had always been a friend of the white men, and he was going to do what he could. He took 25 of his men and went up into the mountains and was able to capture the leader of the uprising and took them to the authorities. So they were able to put down the uprising, and the trouble was over before it had even really started. But because of that, they had everyone in that one collective area, and they were able to, they decided to stay in that area so that they could work together and help each other. So for the next two years, they worked together to be able to raise collective crops together, to help each other with cooking, so that everyone could work and band together to be able to help pay the heavy debt of the rancho. So they, one of the first things that they had to do, this was in the fall of 1851, they needed to get crops in the ground so that they could use the winter rains to be able to raise those crops. So they started a community field. It was 2,000 acres. 2,000 acres is 3 square miles. So they had 1 3 square mile community field where everyone was given a parcel that they were to clear, plow, and then plant with wheat. So that first year they were able to get the wheat up and growing so that they could earn money and be able to provide for themselves here in the valley. That is just, I think, the first couple of examples of what became known as this great community effort. They cared more about the community than they cared about themselves. These two examples, you know, of coming together in the fort, but also the fields, the community fields that they had, was really the first two examples of what they did for the common good of the community. They cared more about the building up the community than they did about their own personal interests, which is really significant to being able to get so much done here in establishing the San Bernardino Valley. Now, the second thing that they did that was really significant is that Apostle Lyman felt that they really needed a lumber industry here in the colony. So he asked for volunteers, and over 100 men volunteered to build this lumber road from San Bernardino up to what is now Crestline. And what they did is they had volunteers that were Native Americans. They had African Americans that had come and had come with them that also volunteered, but they had 100 men who volunteered for 10 days, so 1,000 man-days of labor to build this 12 or 15 mile road up to Crestline. And because of that, they were able to then build sawmills, and from the sawmills create lumber that was then taken into Los Angeles and surrounding areas to build the community. In 1854 to about 1856, several hundred structures were built in Los Angeles alone, and most of them were built from lumber that was milled from the Mormons in the San Bernardino Mountains. They referred to the lumber as Mormon bank notes because they paid for a lot of the debt on the property. The members that actually came here to this valley, it's very interesting to know that story. The people, the main body of that group were about 200 converts that had come from Mississippi. They had left, many of them left their plantations and brought with them their slaves and their servants, African American slaves and servants, and they came with them. So those were the first African Americans to come into Southern California. And because it was a free state, they were free citizens and became just part of the colony. And in addition to that, we had the first Torah came into the valley. There was one of the wagon trains was a Jewish pioneer, and he brought with him the Torah, and it actually rode in a separate wagon all of its own that came here into the valley. And so within the stockade, there were Jewish merchants. That Marcus Katz was the merchant there in the stockade. There were the Quahia and the Serrano Indians frequented the area, as well as Pio Pico, who was the governor in the area from Los Angeles. He came out and called Amasa and Lyman and Charles C. Rich his friends. And when they would have community celebrations, they would all come together. So this community was really all here working together to be able to build this community. So after the colony had been here a couple of years, and we actually had surveyors who laid out Salt Lake City in the grid format, so that came here and laid out San Bernardino Valley. So as you go to San Bernardino and you see the wide streets, it's because Brigham Young said you had to have a wagon with 4 team of oxen be able to turn around in the street. And so that's why you have all those nice wide streets in San Bernardino, and you have all these straight streets on the square here in Redlands, because the whole valley was laid out. The Redlands connection to the San Bernardino colony was really what they referred to as the Mission District, was the area along what's now Barton Road. Kenny, who was the bishop, he and his family lived in the Quasquicentennial, and their job was to plant vineyards because they could be watered through the summer because of the Zonha, and also plant gardens and orchards. So they had there was 300-acre parcel that they were given their responsibility for, and in that area 30 acres of grapevines were planted. So the vineyards that were here for a number of years were planted in February of 1851 and went on for many, many years. Also in that area, we had the first school. Bishop Tenney's wife, Olive, was the first schoolmaster at the Quasquicentennial, and she taught about 40 students. Now with that numbers, it wasn't just the members of the Mormon church that attended that school. There were probably people from San Mateo Canyon that came down, Native Americans, Mexicans. So you have a very ethnically diverse group of students there at the school. In addition, there was the first water wheel was put in the drop, as they called it, of the Zanki, and there was a furniture factory with the Cram brothers was started there in about 1854. So as the colony kept working together and they kept producing, more and more people kept coming. So we started out with a little over 400 people. By 1854, 1855, we have several thousand people. There are upwards of 3,000 people here in this valley. It was the largest community in Southern California, outstripping Los Angeles and San Diego. Much of the produce, the eggs, the milk, the butter, the wheat, the lumber, all came from the San Bernardino colony and was sold in those areas. So there was 100 dozen eggs a week, and 2,000 pounds of butter a week went into Los Angeles and San Diego. So a lot of farming and production was done here. Around 1856, at the end of 1856, Brigham Young sent a letter to the colony asking that all of the members of the church return back to Utah. Johnston's army had been dispatched from the United States government and was marching on Utah. There had been a rumor that there was an uprising in Utah, and falsely, and they had sent an army out to take over with martial law. So Brigham Young called all of the outlying communities to come in, and within, I think this happened in October. By November, within 10 days, we had 2,000 people who loaded up their wagons and headed back to Utah. They either sold for pennies on the dollar or just abandoned what they had spent the last 5 or 6 years working for, with all of their homes and their orchards and their farmlands and they took their livestock and went back to Utah. So this really opened up an opportunity for a lot of the founders of Redlands to come in. Some of the Mormons who chose to stay here, and other people who had come and joined into the San Bernardino colony, they were then able to buy property and be able to establish this wonderful community that we have here. Now, the church came back in the 1930s and started reestablishing itself in San Bernardino, but here in Redlands, the 1950s. And then there was the church started, there was a ward that was established here, and it kept growing and growing and growing. And over the years, we've been able to establish our own stake here in Redlands. And the stake center was built here about 20 years ago. In 2000, it was announced that the Redlands Temple would be built, which was just thrilling for all of us. It was the 113th temple to be built in the church. It is for us, it is a huge deal to have a temple in our area and to have it here in Redlands. It says a lot about our community and a lot about the faithfulness of the members of the church in this whole area. In this whole, it's people come from the high desert, the low desert, all the way out to Temecula, into the Chino area. All of the members of the church come here to the Redlands Temple, and so the temple has been a central point for us now as the church here in Southern California. The Redlands community really warranted having a temple here. They wanted to have a temple so that there were so many members of the church here in the broader area. They wanted to have a temple here so people could come and worship here in this area. But they chose very wisely Redlands because of the community. It is such a beautiful community. There's a sense of belonging here. People refer to this, members and non-members alike, as our temple. The temple is, because it's our community. We feel like we are all connected here together because of, there's so many things within the community that the bowl, the library, because of the philanthropy here in Redlands, people really feeling like they need to contribute to the common good more than themselves. We've been able to create this great spirit that's here in our community. And just like it was during the colonization of the San Bernardino Valley, we still have that here in Redlands. And we see that with what we've been able to create with our Helping Hands Community Day of Service. The Service Club Council came together in about 5 years ago, and under the leadership of Alan Griesmer. And we had started a statewide Community Day of Service, what we call Mormon Helping Hands. So on the same day, every stake around the state, there are around 200 stakes in the state of California, all work on projects in their own communities. Now, the real significance of this area is that this year, for the 125th anniversary, we are creating Heritage Park as part of our Mormon Helping Hands Community Day of Service. And with that, there's so much history from the LDS Church that's right there. When we were asked to do this project, we had no idea that all of the history that had gone on that site, and the more we keep finding out, the more interesting it is. So there were some of the features that will be in that park are the water wheel from that first furniture factory. There will be a vineyard from the first vineyards that were started there. The Zonha reconstruction. We're right there adjacent to the Quasquicentennial. The Barton House, which Ben Barton purchased the property when the Mormons left. There's 3 acres of agriculture which is also what this whole valley, the Mormons were able to establish, were all of these farming, farmlands here in the valley. On that day, we're hoping to have 2,000 to 3,000 people that will be there. We have a lot of students from the schools. Neil Wayner and Lori Rhodes are working with all of the principals and clubs and athletic teams to get students that will be there that day. We're expecting about 1,200 members of the LDS Church that will be there. There will be 300 or 400 people from Grove School that will be there as well. And then we need everyone else in the community that would like to be part of creating history. Heritage Park will be created on April 27th, 8 a.m. in the morning. Come, wear your gloves, bring your shovels. So we want everyone to know that everyone is welcome to come, and we actually need everyone's help. And this will once again be a great opportunity to see that a sense of community above self that is so indicative of